أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر، الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
الحمد لله ثم الحمد لله. الحمد لله حمدا يوافي نعمه ويكافئ مزيده. يا ربنا لك الحمد كما ينبغي لجلال وجهك ولعظيم سلطانك. سبحانك اللهم لا أحصي ثناء عليك أنت كما أثنيت على نفسك. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له. وأشهد أن سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمدا عبد الله ورسوله صفيه وخليله خير نبي أرسله. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد صلاة وسلاما دائمين متلازمين إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد، فيا إخوة الإيمان، أوصيكم ونفسي المذنبة الخاطئة بتقوى الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. I've spent much of this year turning down invitations to speak. I'm a professor of Islamic studies, and all the atrocities that we've witnessed over the last year, 2024, have been so overwhelming. Witnessing such atrocities from afar without feeling the ability to really affect meaningful change, aside from du'as and the occasional moments on the streets standing in protest in solidarity, or attempting to honor the truth in a conversation without sabotaging one's life, and so on. And so, because I work on commentaries on the divine names, Asma'ullah al-Husna, and rather, you could say, abstract, far out topics, or very specific ones, I never really felt that it was appropriate, astaghfirullah, to start, expounding upon the divine names in Islamic thought or something like that, in the context of all the moral injuries that we were witnessing. A moral injury being something, when you see something so heinous and you can't do anything about it, you begin to actually suffer sort of a second-hand trauma just by virtue of what you're witnessing. Until I realized that actually one theme that I think I can reflect on from the space of training that I have been blessed to acquire is this theme of spiritual resilience as Muslims living in non-war zones, and what it means to be a resilient believer in the face of the odds. So resilience literally means strength of the foundation of something. For instance, you have a resilient economy. So a resilient economy can withstand a certain amount of pressure without collapsing. Or you have resilient buildings that can withstand an earthquake without crumbling if they're built the right way. Or you can have a resilient body that can take the shock of some bacterial infection or something. And you have a resilient believer. مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ رِجَالٌ. Among the believers are luminaries. It's not a gender-specific proclamation, men literally, but it's men and women who truly are anchored and rooted in the faith despite the odds. So I would like to share some thoughts on that. Now, resilience in Arabic doesn't quite have the same, maybe maqam al-rida or muruna, ruhiyya or something. There aren't exact equivalents as this word. I haven't quite found the exact counterpart, but I hope that the meaning is clear. And turning to the Quran, I wondered, where would this theme of resilience be most apparent? Where would Allah Ta'ala address the believers in a time when they really needed to tap into that wellspring of faith within the heart from which spiritual resilience can emerge? And it's none other than the Hawamim. The Hawamim are surahs 40 through 46, and they're late Meccan. So in the Meccan period, scholars divided them into early, middle, and late. The late Meccan period is where persecution began to really become quite extreme. People experienced boycotts, bankruptcy, famine, executions, persecutions, and so on. And the Hawamim begins with Surah Ghafir, then Fussilat, Ash-Shura, Al-Zukhruf, Al-Dukhan, Al-Jathiyah, and Al-Ahqaf. It's surahs 40 through 46, and each of them begins with Hamim. And then a proclamation, or a self-confirmation and self-authentication. Hamim, Tanzilum min ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Sort of affirming that this is a descent from the All-Merciful and the Ever-Merciful. And in some of the du'as that have been compiled over the years in the tradition by various salihin and awliya, they tend to look to the Hawamim for protection. So you have, for instance, something called Hizbul Bahar. It's a du'a by Imam Shadili, which begins with Hamim 7 times, because he's evoking the Hawamim. Now the Hawamim, the surahs beginning with Hamim, were actually a booklet that the early Sahaba carried around. And if you look at the structure of the Quran, they're a bit longer than the surahs before and after, because they were always a compositional whole. And when the Quran was finally compiled, the 114 surahs of the Quran, these surahs, Ghafir through Al-Ahqaf, were kept together and preserved because they were always reminders of that period, that the late Meccan period. So I think in order to reflect on the theme of spiritual resilience in these times and what it means now that we're turning a sort of a new chapter in the political landscape, social landscape, cultural landscape, and so on, and even in trying to reflect on our place as a Muslim community in a non-war zone with some kind of impact that we could probably play in the larger picture. The first place I turned to was Al-Hawamim, and there's reports about them being descended chronologically. وَلَيْسَ فِي كِتَابِ اللَّهِ سَبْعُ سُوَرٍ نَزَلَتْ فِي التَّأْلِيفِ وَاحِدَةً بَعْدَ وَاحِدَةٍ إِلَّا الْحَوَامِم. The Hawamim, there's no surahs that descend one after the other except for the Hawamim in very clear chronological order. Quite a stunning stretch of the Quran, you could say, from surahs 40 to 46. And so there are ahadith about the Hawamim being of great merit. To recite them is to find fortitude and strength. Now, what are the themes that emerge from the Hawamim? All of them, when you read them, so think of the intense persecution, and then Allah Ta'ala emphasizes Qur'anan Arabiya, a Qur'an that's Arabic. why would Allah insist on an Arabic composition? The language should be evident to the readers of the Quran. The Hawamim are not defining the Arabic language, but emphasizing the comprehensibility of the message and the comprehensibility of the language. So when Allah Ta'ala says in the context of late Mecca, Inna anzalna Qur'anan Arabiyan, this is an Arabic clear message. It's a desire, or it's an expression of legibility. This is a legible text. I'm being clear in this message. And so it seems to be a response to challenges by the kuffar, the idolaters, the pagans, Jewish and Christian attacks in this context. And you see it over and over. بِلِسَانٍ عَرَبِيٍّ مُبِينٍ قُرْآنًا عَرَبِيًّا غَيْرَ ذِي عِوَجٍ. There's no crookedness. And so, to my mind, that strikes me as a call for us in these times to be clear about where we stand, to be clear in the message that we want to convey. What exactly is our faith? What exactly are our moral red lines? What exactly is our lifestyle? And we want to convey that with clarity, without compromise, but with a certain steadfast firmness that doesn't necessarily cause ambiguity or a sense of, illegibility or ambiguity. So that, I think, is worth reflecting on. Just the insistence on the Arabic nature of the Quran, the clarity of the Quran in these surahs when we think about where to turn for guidance in these times. Another theme that emerges through the Hawamim is the theme of refusing the message, at-takdhib. So the unbeliever's reaction to the message is emphasized as well and manifests in many forms that the Hawamim explain over and over. There's mockery, there's ridicule, there's disavowal, I'm not that. There's unwillingness to listen. There's the turning away, the idbar. There's the various accusations, and the rejection that the Hawamim describe is weaved into stories about Ad and Thamud and Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salatu salam, and the attitude of Fir'aun toward Musa alayhi salatu salam and the children of Israel, the Banu Israel. And what's fascinating is that within these descriptions, there's always a believer concealing their faith, because they somehow can't really stand up in the context that they find themselves in and say, I am a believer. So you have mu'minu ali Fir'aun, وَشَهِدَ شَاهِدٌ مِّن بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ عَلَى مِثْلِهِ. You have these instances within all the ridicule, the mockery, the layers of darkness. There's somebody in the thick of it that's saying, I'm a believer, but I can't really stand up. So think about that. You're persecuted. This is the late Meccan period. Allah Ta'ala is describing the mockery and saying, there are allies even within that space. But you have to be able to talk to them and understand that they may not be able to stand publicly for you. And it's okay. You can't tell them, if you're not standing at this moment with us, then you are standing with evil. It doesn't quite work like that in the Hawamim. What is somebody under the tyranny of Fir'aun supposed to do except to conceal their faith, for instance? And so the believers are called to really identify allies in what may be a sea of darkness and of mockery. وَشَهِدَ شَاهِدٌ مِّن بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ عَلَى مِثْلِهِ مِنْ آلِ عَلَى مِثْلِهِ. And so Allah Ta'ala is pointing us to the presence of supporters among the rejecting community in Mecca, and in these times is reminding us of the presence of supporters outside of our community who may be concealing their faith. You may not know that, but if we can speak with clarity and also leverage our, you could say, our ethical life and our just sensibilities to understand that not everybody can actually speak. People are afraid of losing livelihoods. and so on. But they're willing to perhaps work in the nooks and crannies, and to be able to just honor that. It's all right if you can't go all the way, all out. All right, be among the hidden allies. Let's say we need any support we can get. Allah Ta'ala doesn't reject these figures in the Hawamim. He points them out to the oppressed. Another theme that emerges, of course, is the theme of sabr, of oppression and persecution. And this is quite evident in the surahs 40 through 46. And the unbelievers are described as mustakbirin. Istikbar is literally self-grandeur. Kabir is great. Istakbara is to become great, to proclaim oneself to be great. So tyrannical oppressors, self-grandeur, arrogance. And the mu'minun are described as the mustad'afin, as those who are weak. It's literally the opposite. Mustakbir, mustad'af. Kabir is great, da'if is small. And so Allah calls upon the believer to bear patiently. وَلَمَنْ صَبَرَ وَغَفَرَ إِنَّ ذَلِكَ لَمِنْ عَزْمِ الْأُمُورِ. And the language of judgment in the Hawamim reminds you of almost like forensic language that's used in a court case. Shahida shahidun nastansikh kitab. There's suspects, there's guilt, there's regret, there's appeals for forgiveness, and there's the unbelievers whose bodily organs in the Hawamim are testifying against them. Subhanallah. In other words, their fitrah, the limbs are speaking on the tongue of the fitrah and saying, you're not going to be able to testify against what is your innate disposition as a human being in this situation. So the believers are reading about what's actually happening. You can think of it in the hereafter, but also in the here below, because the two are connected. It's not that just in the hereafter their legs will start testifying against them in their hands. Even here, there's no way you can violate your innate human nature to such an atrocious extent and not suffer the consequences internally, at the level of mental health, at the level of suicide rates, you name it. And so these are sort of lessons that we can contemplate and think with when we try to draw into or tap into the spiritual resilience, this ethos of resilience that we're called upon to try to tap into in these times. And then I find it fascinating, the final point, and very short one, is that there's hints in the midst of despair and worry of a practical solution. Ardullahi wasi'a. Don't attach yourself to one land. Allah Ta'ala is in every land. God's earth is vast. It's not about a physical location. It's about where you can practice your deen, and then the hijrah happens very soon thereafter. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. If people could move up a little bit so that we can leave some space behind. So I don't wish to be contrarian, but I do want to express, I think, a little bit of frustration I feel in my heart when I sit in khutbahs and there's this constant emphasis on do something, do something, do something, get out there, Islam is active, you gotta. It doesn't, the Hawamim are not exactly, yes, do something in relation to your situation, but also do something internally sometimes and externally. And so it's a question of balancing. Sort of the call for, marching on the streets has to always be balanced with a call for worship, for devotion, for cultivating learning, for cultivating curiosity, for thinking about the long term, because really, realistically, you're probably only going to be able to plant seeds for your grandchildren or your great-grandchildren. And so how do you find the strength to do something so selfless as to plant a seed whose fruits you will never reap in a tangible way in this life? You can't do that by burning out. You can't do that by constantly going out there, doing something, and then becoming all frazzled and disheartened. And this activist space is a space where hearts are broken, egos clash, faith crumbles. It's not an easy space because the resilience isn't there to face that. That's advanced Tawheed. That's Medina. And it's not clear to me that we're in Medina. It seems like we're somewhere between Mecca and Medina at this point. Yes, we have institutions and spaces to pray, alhamdulillah. But it's not like, it doesn't seem like we're there. And in Mecca, it's قُمِ اللَّيْلَ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. Stand up at night. And so I think it's a question of balance and a question of really taking time to think in the long term and to step back and think of the grand cycles that Allah Ta'ala is the grand arcs of time that helps you put things into perspective so that you don't internally collapse into despair. Who are you going to help if you're unable to function? And subhanAllah, some of our great scholars in this time actually, from the moral injuries that they witnessed, actually ended up having to seek very, very serious mental health treatment and were not functional for a while. So this is all to say, let's read the Hawamim and let's think about the full spectrum of what Allah Ta'ala is calling upon us to do and to share and reflect together. Allahumma aghfir lana warhamna wahdina wa'afina wa'afu anna warzuqna wathabbitna ala ash-shahada وتوفانا مسلمين يا رب العالمين. اللهم ارحم والدينا، اللهم ارحم من علمنا، اللهم ارحم من سبقنا بالإيمان، اللهم لا تجعل في قلوبنا غلا للذين آمنوا إنك أنت الوهاب. اللهم يا رب ارحم مشايخنا، اللهم ارحم آباءنا واسترنا فوق الأرض وتحت الأرض ويوم العرض. اللهم اشف أنت الشافي لا شفاء إلا شفاؤك شفاء لا يغادر سقما يا رب العالمين. اللهم يسر ولا تعسر، اللهم اهدنا فيمن هديت ونورنا بنورك يا رب العالمين. اللهم اغفر وارحم وأنت خير الراحمين. سبحانك اللهم بحمدك سبحان الله العظيم لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين. اللهم اغفر وارحم وأنت خير الراحمين. اللهم ارحم أمة سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. اللهم اجعلنا أهلا لأمته وثبتنا على ملته يا رب العالمين يا أكرم الأكرمين يا رب العالمين. واغفر لوالدينا ولمن سبقنا بالإيمان وارحم أهل غزة وارحم أهل السودان وأهل سوريا يا رب العالمين وأهل البلدان أجمعين يا رب العالمين. And we ask Allah to guide our politicians. اللهم اهديهم يا رب العالمين. We ask for Allah to guide whoever is in a position of power. يا أكرم الأكرمين يا رب العالمين. And we ask for wisdom in these times so that we may discern. يا أكرم الأكرمين, what you will for us to do and what you wish for us to do. يا عزيز يا غفور يا كريم يا ملك يا قدوس يا سلام. اللهم اغفر وارحم أنت خير الراحمين. وصل اللهم وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد كما صليت على سيدنا إبراهيم وعلى آل سيدنا إبراهيم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد كما باركت على سيدنا إبراهيم وعلى آل سيدنا إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. عباد الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. فاذكروا الله العظيم يذكركم واشكروه على نعمه يزيدكم ولا ذكر الله أكبر ولا ذكر الله أكبر ولا ذكر الله أكبر والله يعلم ما تصنعون. وأقم الصلاة.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد كما استووا. الله أكبر. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم ملك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. نون والقلم وما يسطرون. ما أنت بنعمة ربك بمجنون. وإن لك لأجرا غير ممنون. وإنك لعلى خلق عظيم. فستبصر ويبصرون بأيكم المفتون. إن ربك هو أعلم بمن ضل عن سبيله وهو أعلم بالمهتدين. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم ملك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والتين والزيتون وطور سينين وهذا البلد الأمين. لقد خلقنا الإنسان في أحسن تقويم ثم رددناه أسفل سافلين إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات فلهم أجر غير ممنون. فما يكذبك بعد بالدين أليس الله بأحكم الحاكمين. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.